On the morning of October 30th, 2022, fans of the hit TV series The Witcher were hit with devastating news. Henry Cavill revealed that he will no longer play Geralt of Rivia, the show's main protagonist, after the conclusion of Season 3. A heartbreaking turn of events, one that has bred incredible bitterness towards the show, and of course the writers. This is a fucking tragedy, and genuinely unexpected. Losing Cavill has obviously brought into question whether fans of the show would even continue to watch after the replacement, Liam Hemsworth, takes over the role. In all honesty, I don't know if I'll still be able to watch the show knowing Henry won't be a part of it anymore. But why exactly did this happen? What could make a production kick out the lead, not just a lead, but a massive actor who fans praised as being the perfect fit for the role? And of course, is this the end of The Witcher?
I have been a fan of the fantasy genre since I was a boy and played the Witcher games. I played The Witcher 3 through twice, and I just wanted to make sure that Geralt was represented as accurately as possible.
Henry William Cavill has a career that spans over 2 decades, rising to prominence first in the highly acclaimed film adaptation of The Count of Monte Cristo in 2002, and speeding through the industry to roles like the Man of Steel himself. At this stage, he's an incredibly in-demand actor, but that doesn't tell the whole story as to why fans of The Witcher love him so much. Henry is a nerd at heart, not one posing for brownie points, but truly into the culture.
Well, the first time I got the call, I actually missed it. I was playing World of Warcraft at the time, and I had my priorities straight.
He plays RPGs, loves World of Warcraft, paints miniatures like Warhammer, builds his own gaming PCs, and grew up doing what most of the fans of comic book movies or video game adaptations have been doing. Despite looking like the epitome of a Giga Chad, Henry Cavill was seen as one of the audience when it came to loving some of the characters and franchises he would later go on to star in, which of course makes him a perfect fit for some of these roles, as he's also a fan, so he's more likely to do it justice.
Yeah, so do you correct people?
I don't necessarily... I am effusive about getting the being loyal to the source material. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Despite this, Henry's initial casting as the White Wolf was met with much criticism. After all, Henry looks nothing like Geralt. Geralt is a rugged man, Henry is handsome. Many fans questioned the casting decision based solely on this fact. Mads Mikkelsen, definitely. Nikolai Coster-Waldau, maybe. But Henry Cavill? Ugh, no thanks, pass. The sentiment on social media was that of skepticism for his ability to take on the role of Geralt, but the woman in charge of the project had a different perspective entirely, and it wasn't based on looks, but on passion. He was my first meeting. I didn't have writers or scripts yet, just a green light and a lot of passion. That was 4 months ago, and I've never forgotten the passion he brought. He is Geralt, he always has been. I'm so thrilled to welcome Henry Cavill to the #Witcher family. But why exactly was she so adamant that Henry was the right man for the job? Well, it comes down to persistence. His love for the Witcher video game series led him to do everything in his power to try and get this job. He constantly called his agents and forced them to call the showrunners over and over and over again. Eventually, it worked. He got the meeting before the script had been written, and before casting was even a thought. The seed was planted, and he made a lasting impression. He did that because he knew this role was perfect for him, that he would do it justice as a true fan of the material it was based upon. This turned out to probably be the best decision of the entire production. While fans started out skeptical about his ability to deliver a believable Geralt, his presentation was perfect. He embodied the character on screen, but most importantly, he respected the story too much to compromise, giving fans the assurance that this show would be different than those of the past. A rational concern for gaming and book fans when seeing a media adaptation. It's easier to name the ones that have been done well than it is to name the failures, as there are few and far between. Video games especially carry with them a terrible, terrible track record of television shows or movies butchering the initial source material, creating a slap in the face to the original fans, marketing themselves to a fan base that simply doesn't exist. Writers and producers without respect for the original work, thinking they know better and trying to use the media as a vehicle to tell their own stories instead of the ones fans come to expect and already love. The Witcher Season 1 was of course far from perfect, but one thing fans could agree upon is that Henry Cavill was doing the role justice. Even if the story deviated a tolerable amount, he was going to carry the show the whole time, no matter what. Unfortunately, things behind the scenes were starting to go wrong. There were decisions being made that would put everything at risk, decisions that might even kill the entire show. During the filming of Season 2, it became clear that lines were being drawn in the sand. Working conditions were becoming difficult, with constant conflict. Season 2 released, and fans noticed this on screen. People who had played the video games, but more importantly the people who had read Sapkowski's books, were becoming more and more disillusioned with the direction. The shift of narrative was clear. Things were not really making sense. The source material was being disrespected or outright ignored. The numbers, however, the people viewing were still good, which allowed for a Season 3 greenlight from Netflix and the ability to perhaps steer the ship to safer waters if, of course, fan input was heard. Unfortunately, during production of Season 3, Henry Cavill took to social media and announced his departure from the project. From the outside, this seemed incredibly out of the blue. After all, why would a man who fought tooth and nail to get himself cast in this role give it up when the show was going to continue on without him? How could he do that to himself, to the show, and to the fans who saw him as Geralt and entirely irreplaceable? Immediately, the internet rumour mills came to life, and theories were being tossed around as to why exactly this happened. One common speculation at the time was that due to DC's push to compete with Marvel, Henry's much more important and lucrative role as Superman was going to limit the time available to act on the Witcher series. That he had simply made the choice to give up the role of his dreams on a show he seemed so passionate about in order to continue playing the Man of Steel. But did Superman really kill the Witcher?
I wanted to make it official that I am back as Superman. And the image you see on this post and what you saw in Black Adam are just a very small taste of things to come.
This theory was shot down early, in part due to Henry's own words. He stated that everyone involved on both sides knew of his desire to maintain both, and that he would play The Witcher for at least 7 seasons, quote, as long as we can keep telling great stories which honour Sapkowski's work. Which could of course just have been words, a broken promise, but just a few weeks later, Henry announced that after meeting the new DC director James Gunn, his role as Superman was now over, leaving him seemingly infinite time. Henry was now out of his 2 main and most beloved roles within a matter of weeks, and the fans with more questions about what it was that actually killed The Witcher. Pretty soon, however, they discovered that the reason Season 2 was noticeably worse than Season 1 was exactly the reason Henry was no longer playing Geralt. In a social media post, one of The Witcher show writers took to Instagram to end speculation. Bo DeMayo said, quote, I've been on shows, namely Witcher, which some of the writers were not fans or actively disliked the books and games, even actively mocking the source material. It's a recipe for disaster and bad morale. Fandom as a litmus test checks egos and makes all the long nights worth it. You have to respect the work before you're allowed to add to its legacy. A bold claim that showrunner Lauren responded to directly, ending her message with, quote, don't believe everything you read. Fans again were given the breadcrumb trail to follow. Before Henry had even announced his departure, it was clear the show was veering towards its own path, away from respecting the books. With this added testimony on social media, it was starting to make a whole lot more sense. Henry's quote about staying for at least 7 seasons, remember, ended with, quote, as long as we can keep telling great stories which honour Sapkowski's work. To Henry, they were no longer respecting this work. At this point, people started to dissect old interviews from Henry and saw that he was even publicly discussing how hard he'd had to fight to get certain elements of Geralt from the books into the show. Quote, this season, I really wanted to make sure that we represented the book's Geralt more accurately, and that we saw him speak more. I pushed really, really hard for that. As well as later when he discussed some of his favourite scenes from the books being cut entirely from the season. Quote, it was such a shame, a lovely bit from Blood of Elves had been left out of Season 2. He tried to do it justice, of course, by improvising part of that scene during the death of Roach, Geralt's horse. Henry doing things like this didn't seem to go down well in the writer's room. At the very beginning, they lovingly called Henry a walking Witcher encyclopedia. Remember, Lauren publicly said that he was Geralt, he was born for this role. So originally, this was good, to have an actor so incredibly engrossed in his role to strive for perfection. But now that the writers wanted to veer away from that and tell their own stories, using the books as a vehicle for their own ideas, the walking encyclopedia was now a problem. During the fan backlash, which lasted months and is probably still ongoing at this point, writers from The Witcher went on the offensive. Leaks were being published about Henry Cavill, claiming that he's, quote, toxic, misogynistic, and a stereotypical gamer. The claims were that Henry and the now fired writer, who were both big fans of the games and books, were fighting to keep things true, and it was them versus the world just so happened in this example to have been mostly female. They claimed that this weird alliance of two men were forcing changes on the regular and ignoring the female crew, which included writers and directors. This led to many complaints to human resources, and Henry was allegedly repeatedly warned. He ignored those warnings and continued his, quote, toxic demeanor, which led to Netflix firing him, but allowing him to state he was stepping away publicly. The words in the report are quite telling. They say, quote, his extreme obsession with the game was creating an inconvenience among the crew, which goes in line with what we know about why he wanted to play Geralt in the first place, as well as the writer's public testimony stating the source material was being disrespected. Henry wanted to play Geralt as written in the books, and this is what he was told when he signed on originally. Unfortunately, now they were making him play somebody completely different in a story that didn't exist. That is not what he signed up for, and he seemed to be fighting that every single day, even at the cost of his own job. The fact that the showrunners and writers were female, I doubt has anything to do with anything. The accusation that he's misogynistic just because they happen to be women seems incredibly convenient and relies on the idea he wouldn't have acted in the same manner had they been men instead and writing the show in the same way. At this point, The Witcher Season 3 will be the last we see of Henry Cavill in a role he seemed to have been born to play. After that, the show ends for me and for many other fans. While the new actor, Liam Hemsworth, will undoubtedly do his best to respectfully play Geralt, it should be clear to all that the show is now dead. With how Season 2 deviated, and how Season 3 will likely be even worse, considering Henry's alleged escalating behaviour due to said changes, displays to me that the actor change is not even the biggest problem the show faces. Without Henry fighting tooth and nail to the point of being fired in order to keep it even remotely serviceable to original fans, The Witcher without him undoubtedly is going to turn into something nobody asked for. Going down in history as yet another video game or book adaptation that could have been amazing and serviced the millions of existing fans, but instead was taken over by the ego of creating something new. Rip The Witcher. It was fun while it lasted.
I understand what you're saying, but when it comes to fans, it is a fan's right to have whatever opinion they want to have. And people are going to be upset because, especially when you're talking about books or games, because you're never going to be the exact person who they had in their head or who they played on Witcher 3, for example. I don't necessarily consider that toxic. I just consider that passionate.